I know how many of you have, know who Seth Roberts is. I know he was big in this community, and at the QS conference a couple weeks ago, he was a big topic. And so since this is our first meetup since he passed away, I just wanted to mention it. He was definitely a leader in this whole self-experimentation world, and I was watching one of his videos a couple weeks ago, and he had this quote. It was, "The best way to learn is to do." And I was thinking about it, and I realized that's the whole reason that this group gets together. Like that's why we are here. We're all here to learn, but we choose to learn by doing rather than just studying or imagining or talking. And so with that in mind, I just asked everyone to go into this meetup with a mission, and that's to pick one thing. There's going to be a lot of ideas, a lot of potential experiments that we discussed today. I know Dave is full of them. He's done all of them himself. So pick one of them and go out of here and decide to do it, to try it, and to learn from it, and then come back to our next meetup and share what you've learned. So with that, I guess the best way to learn is to do, and Dave is the example, the best example of that. He's been doing this for over 15 years, spent a good deal of money experimenting with different technologies and different techniques for self-improvement and what we call biohacking. He's lost 100 pounds, he's increased his IQ, hacked his mind, body, and soul. His podcast is #1 in iTunes for fitness and health. I think everyone here knows of him in some way or another, or at least has tried the coffee. So without further ado, Dave, thank you for coming, and just go from there.
It's my pleasure. That quote from Seth Roberts, who was a friend, is really good. You know, to learn is to do. And one of the, by the way, can you guys hear me all right? The audio is working? All right. I'm on day 6 of like speaking every day multiple times in multiple cities, and my voice is actually starting to give out a bit, despite all the IV nutrition I did in New York. All right. Anyway, still working on being perfect. But the to learn is to do thing, my mind positioning is not good, or something's loose. How about now? Any better?
Yeah.
Better? All right, it was too high. So, this is going to be awkward. How about now? Man. All right. You know, this is like biohacking right here. All right. There's another way to do this. Yeah. Do that. I could do this too, but it's probably better to do that one because this top screen isn't that good. If I put it out here, is this good?
That's good.
All right, yeah. I'll do my best. It's pretty darn directional though, so. Normally I would just shout, but since I'm talking to 1,500 parents of autistic kids tomorrow, I want to save a little bit for them. See, there it goes. I didn't do that, I swear. Anyway, to learn is to do. And if this is really bad, I will just stop using the mic. So you guys tell me when it's time to quit using the mic. One of the things...
Oh.
Any luck on this one?
I don't really know if this works.
Hello. Does this work?
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. This is so much better. So to learn is to do. One of the things I've seen a lot of lately is evidence-based things online. Evidence-based medicine, right? As opposed to the medicine we did before. So it's very easy to disprove every single thing that you might try and do as a biohacker. You can go online, you can find a study that says the opposite of what you're doing is true. Which means the most important evidence you can have is actually evidence-based evidence, which is like, oh look, the sky is blue because I saw it with my own eyes. Now, there wasn't a double-blind study about the blueness of the sky, yet somehow you know that at least to you it's blue. And when you're biohacking, especially when you're getting beyond things that are easy to quantify, like your hormone levels, or things that are more around consciousness, attention, focus, presence, awareness, those things, well, your perception of them is reality. And it doesn't matter if there's 55 studies that say there is no evidence that what you're doing works. You're like, but I can do things I couldn't do yesterday and it's reliable and repeatable, then it is. And accepting that is a really powerful thing to do as a biohacker. To say, all right, what I can measure, what I can measure is what is, even if it doesn't match with the study over here, or the study over there, or what someone else said, because we have different genes, we have lots of things in us. And it's that personalization, that individualization that makes biohacking particularly important. The other question that comes up frequently is, what's the difference between quantified self and biohacking? And does anyone here know a good difference between the two and want to share? No? Cool, I would love to actually get someone besides me to say it, just so I can see if the message is getting through. Do you want to just shout it out, or do you want to?
I think a quantified self is a subset of biohacking.
So quantified self is a subset of biohacking. I would say there's an overlap of a Venn diagram that's pretty good, but if you quantify yourself, you've now measured and put numbers to something, which is incredibly valuable. But in the act of doing that and then analyzing the data, you put time between when the data was gathered and when you actually made use of it. So all week long you gather data, and then on Friday you're like, wow, this week I walked X thousand steps and I scratched my right armpit 14 times, and whatever else it was you were quantifying. And you might go, next week I'm going to walk more steps, and I'm going to scratch my armpit less. Those are my goals. Okay? It's real. The problem is that you decided you wanted to do it, but it was a conscious decision. Yet, did you think about scratching your armpit 14 times? No, some part of you scratched your armpit that you weren't thinking about. Not that it's bad to scratch your armpits, it's just an example. Maybe picking your nose is a better one. But whatever it is, I bet that you didn't like or you wanted to change. So we have a part of our biology that isn't conscious. And it's that unconscious part of you that typically gets you in trouble. And this is where I think that my dear friends in the quantified self movement are missing something. Because there tends to be the perception that a lot of change is driven by a conscious desire to change. And there's no doubt that wanting to change helps. But how many times have you said, I'm not going to eat the bagel today? And then you ate the bagel. Like, it happens to everyone, and it happened to me when I weighed 300 pounds. It doesn't happen to me anymore, actually, which is kind of cool. But what's happening there? And what's happening there is the difference between quantified self and biohacking. With biohacking, you use real-time feedback whenever possible. And with biohacking, you do what hackers do. You change an external variable, and you look at what's the effect, what's the effect of that change in real time. So the difference between looking at a graph of your heart rate variability for the entire day and going, I was stressed today. I shall resolve to be less stressed tomorrow. And, oh my God, I'm stressed right now. I better make the light turn green. That's the difference in my mind between biohacking and between quantified self. However, if you are a biohacker, you are blind without quantified self, because quantified selfers are the map makers. They use the data from many different people, and they put that out there to help us understand more about the human condition and even more about what you did over the last year, over the last day, over the last hour. Precious, valuable information. Where I find that driving change happens the most, though, is in what did I do in the last 350 milliseconds, because that's the part of me that's irritating. The part of me that does things before I notice what it's doing, and that's where I want to have the most control. And that's where your stress response happens. And that's where you do things like yell at people you didn't mean to yell at, and flip off that person in traffic, and all the other things like that. And that's where biohacking can be the most fun. So one of the first experiments I would think about is, how many of you have a heart rate variability sensor, trainer, device of some sort? Good number of you. If not, think about it. The inner balance sensor is $99. The HRV Sense thing, the app that I make, is, I don't know, $2 or something. I actually don't know exactly how much it costs, but it works with a polar strap, and it's about $60. And what you can do with one of those is put whatever the monitor is where you can see it on your dashboard if you drive, and then go for a drive and watch how many times you get ready to kill someone. It took me about 2 weeks of doing this when I drive in traffic. Every time someone cuts me off, it's like, bam. Now, I don't consciously think, oh, that guy cut me off. He must be a bad man. Therefore, I want to kill him. No. All of that is subconscious. All of that is not me. It's not my prefrontal cortex. all of that is basically a Labrador in your body. And a lot of you may have heard this analogy, but the Labrador there is the thing that we're trying to train as biohackers. And the reason I call it a Labrador Retriever is, they're great dogs, big floppy black dogs, drool and everything, and loyal but kind of dumb at the same time. So the three things that a Labrador would do, number one is look, a stick, and there's your distractibility. So you're having a hard time paying attention, hard time focusing, there's your Labrador taking over. Like, what can I pay attention to now? Huh? What, huh? And then the next thing is, oh, what is that? Like spoiled something? I'll eat that. Okay, that was that food that you said you weren't going to eat that you ate because you got a craving and it was sitting there looking at you. You ever see a dog with a piece of popcorn on his nose? Just training to sit there and wait. That's you sitting there with jelly beans in front of you if your biology isn't properly cared for. And you're sitting there and that shaking is costing you something. And the final thing that the Labrador will do is, oh, look, a leg. Let me go hump it, right? Okay, like sexual behavior can sometimes get us in trouble, although it can be fun. So those three things map out most of the universe of human behaviors that get us in trouble, and none of them are particularly planned and conscious. Just like when you, say, accidentally lean against something really hot, you pull away before you, oh, I smell flesh, oh, it's mine, I think I'll pull away. None of that rational stuff happens, yet we like to convince ourselves that we are rational beings. But we have all these behaviors that are irrational, and the reason is that there's a speed mismatch. Our human brain is really smart and really slow, and the Labrador brain is really dumb but really fast. And the rules that it's following are probably not in your best interests. So a lot of what I've learned to do as a biohacker is first to fuel the reptile brain, which is basically your hormonal system, the basic systems in your body that you need to have functioning. And from an evolutionary perspective, this makes great sense because think about what we need to survive as a species, or as animals in general. If you don't have your reptile brain working, you're hosed. And you go up from there to your mammal brain. That's all you need to survive. Those three behaviors: eating, running away from scary things, and mating. That's enough to keep us alive for the next ice age, right? You never have to turn on your human brain even one time for multiple generations of humans to survive. There's evolutionary kind of paleo thinking for you, right? That means that if you're not feeding yourself properly from an evolutionary perspective, your body's going to do the stuff that's necessary for survival. And you're going to get to a certain point, and after that point, when there's excess energy in the form of calories, interesting, as well as things like fat and the right vitamins, then the prefrontal cortex is going to get some of that extra fuel. And it's not quite that well delineated, but the model is that when there's something that messes with your energy, you're going to feel it in your attention and your focus in your human brain first, because that's the least important mission critical part of your brain. Which is kind of scary. This is one of the reasons that I have noticed in my own experiments that small amounts of toxins can have larger effects on your ability to pay attention and focus. They're not going to kill you, they just make you less sharp than you were before. And sometimes they'll kill you later. The same thing goes for food and having enough calories to keep your brain going, and on and on and on. So the experiment that I'm proposing is take your heart rate variability sensor, the one that tells you when your body goes into fight or flight mode, or when it's in parasympathetic dominant mode, and see if you can drive wherever it is that you're going to drive without ever slipping out of a state of high coherence, or where your heart rate variability is rhythmic and high amplitude. If you can do that, you've done some amount of training. If you can't do that, you should ask yourself why. Why is the Labrador in your head trying to kill people? Because you didn't tell it that it could, but it's doing it anyway. And that's kind of a gateway drug. Because what you're going to figure out now is, well, wait, what are the other times that the Labrador in my head is ready to kill? When I'm meeting with my boss, when I'm meeting with my mother-in-law, whatever it might be. But getting that level of understanding there is a different thing than just monitoring my stress level throughout the day, because you're correlating it, but more importantly, you're taking control. And that's a very interesting biohack. You can also do things like look at what's the impact of what you eat on your heart rate variability. And that's an interesting kind of study as well. If you're eating foods that you're sensitive to, whether you know what they are or not, there is an impact on your heart rate variability, because if you eat something that you're sensitive to, that Labrador in your body says, oh no, stress, like there's something bad happening biologically, and you'll see a change. In fact, you'll see your heart rate change, not just your heart rate variability. Your heart variability will show the sympathetic nervous system stress, but your heart rate will go up by about 16 beats per minute within 90 minutes of eating. This is the basis for the Food Sense app, which I'm baking into the Bulletproof Diet book. By the way, I have a favor to ask of all of you, and my people made me promise to ask you. Please go to bulletproofdietbook.com and sign up, because December 2nd, my book is launching with Rodale. I'm really excited about that. And if you do that, then I'll send you an email about it when it happens, and you'll probably get a free copy of the book if you pay shipping, handling, and all sorts of other nice stuff that we'll send you. So trying to do a big book launch, and your help is appreciated. But this is the sort of stuff that'll be in that book. Questions so far?
On the heart rate variability, I haven't been able to tease out the effect of a caffeinated product like cocoa powder. It makes my heart rate go up, but isn't that expected just from the caffeine?
On heart rate variability, or on the Food Sense app?
Food Sense.
So the Food Sense app is tough. If you're using caffeine, or if you exercise right after you work out, you're going to skew the results. So it's tough to do that. What you want to do is you want to check without using caffeine, whatever the foods are. The problem is if you're sensitive to chocolate or coffee, that might be hard to tell with that app, because it's always going to happen. Or meth, same problem.
Should I try that?
How do you do on the car test with the heart rate variability?
How do I do on the car test? Depending on what the setting is, there's 4 levels of difficulty on the thing.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so I don't know how to do it in the hardest setting in traffic, because even on the hardest setting, for me at least, I have to really concentrate and control my breath to get it in the green on the hardest setting.
That's universal.
For the 3rd setting, I can do it in traffic most of the time. And I've tested myself when I'm doing like a webinar to like 100 or so people. I can be 70% in the green zone on setting 1, even when I'm presenting, when I'm not controlling my breathing.
So you've improved, though?
Yeah, almost definitely. And when I drive in traffic now, I mean, it's pretty rare if I'm monitoring myself for it to go into the red zone. Like it might happen, but
my dad needed to monitor.
Yeah, it's usually because the guy really deserved it.
Dave, what other contexts have you monitored HRV in? You obviously use it to relax while it's under traffic. Yeah.
Part of the problem is that motion artifacts change things. So if you're wobbling around, then it's going to artificially change this. If you're moving your head, you're getting some muscle tension, stuff like that. So it's hard to do that when you're running. You can get a better sense with a chest strap, like the Polar chest strap. And in this case, the algorithm that's used with HRV Sense, which is something I do in partnership with Sweetwater, that algorithm is slightly different than the patented HeartMath algorithm. So there can be a little bit of a mismatch there, but you can get a pretty good like all-day graph coming from that. And if you want to be really cool when you're asleep, this is what I do. Beddit makes a sensor. And if you spring for the expensive one, this is BEDDIT, the expensive one has Ethernet. It's not Wi-Fi, so you don't have to like bathe in Wi-Fi while you're sleeping. And this is basically a strip that goes on your mattress pad with built-in sensors. And when you have the laboratory features enabled, you can actually get your nighttime heart rate variability, as well as temperature, sound, light, heart rate, respiration, and what you had for dinner. Okay, maybe not the last one, but it's an amazing amount of data. The other thing that's worth thinking about, I have some quantified self friends who are, I would call them data pack rats. They're gathering data, gathering data, gathering data. But what are you going to do with the data, right? If gathering data comes at 0 cost, then what the heck, gather it. So I like my Beddit sensor because it comes at 0 cost. It's built into my bed. I don't have to do anything. I get an email in the morning that says, here's how you slept, and it's just painless. But if you have to do a lot of things to gather data, then you better track what you're going to hack instead of just sort of tracking everything. Because it can be exhausting to try and track everything. When I first started doing this stuff, it was like, Excel or paper, but you could make a really complex spreadsheet and spend like 2 hours a day filling it out, and you probably aren't going to learn that much. So what you want to do is form a hypothesis that says, if I change one of these variables, then one of these variables should change. And if you want to do the scientific thing and only change one variable, ha ha ha, good luck with that. Doesn't work. And here's why. If there are 5 things that make you weak, and you say, I'll eliminate 1. No, it wasn't that one. Eliminate 2. Wasn't that one. You can go all the rest of your life eliminating single variables or changing single variables. So if you want to change something, here's a word of advice. It took me like 3 or 4 years to figure this out. Change everything. If it's going to move the needle in the direction that you've chosen, don't go slow. Just do it. Do everything. And see if you get the result you want. And the odds are you probably will. And then you can start undoing the changes you made, maybe 5 at a time or 1 at a time. And what you'll find is that you might actually have expensive pee. You might take some vitamins you didn't need for a while. Terrible, tragedy, right? It doesn't matter. But if you got the change you're looking for, that's precious. So that's the direction that I've headed, where single variables just are never going to cut it. Your life is only so long. And let's imagine that you wanted to bake bread. Well, I baked the water, then I baked the yeast, then I baked the flour. You're more like bread than you are like a single variable computer. You're not a single variable kind of entity. You're a complex system that interacts with your environment, that has lots of systems that we don't even understand. And one of the things that informed the way I do these things, and not that I'm the only one by a long shot that does it this way, but it's computer science. I used to run the Web and Internet Engineering program at the University of California, and the challenge there was that traditional computer science was all about you have access to the code, you have access to the system, and this is your universe, and you kind of draw a picture around it. And that's where you did your simulation or your model. And the annoying internet comes along, and it's like, well, you have access to this layer of the OSI model or whatever, but you don't have access to the network because it's owned by some internet service provider that's run by some guy who's smoking pot. And on the other end of it is a server run by some other guy running code you don't have access to. And all of a sudden, you're still responsible for doing whatever it is you were supposed to do, but there are variables that you cannot see and you do not control. And that is much more like what life is like than what computer science and engineering used to look like. Those are typically disciplines that until very recently had a lot less chaos theory and a lot less of this stuff we don't control in it. So think about that when you're thinking, I'm going to just change one thing. You know, I'll measure the difference between 0.5 gram and 1 gram of vitamin C. You might be able to tease out a difference, and some scientists in a lab ought to absolutely do that. In the meantime, if you know it's safe, try taking 10 grams of vitamin C and see what happens. Worst you'll do is poop on yourself. Any other questions?
What do you use for convenience for like logging things? You ever get a guide, use your phone? Do you have someone do it for you?
What do I use for logging? I have a logging fairy. I tend to track what I'm hacking. So I also like things that are very low cost. I mentioned Bedit. The other app that I just really love is Sleep Cycle. How many of you use Sleep Cycle? If you don't use this, it's just worth doing. I have...
What's the last part?
Sleep. Sleep Cycle. I've got to love my voice.
Thank you.
So Sleep Cycle turns your phone into wake up at the top of a sleep cycle, so you wake up better, you have more energy during the day. It also has in the new version anyway, has a counter for how many steps you took, so you don't need that Basis Sciences wristband that I used to work for. It also does a reasonably good job of sleep quality. It's not great, not by a long shot, but it's better than you think. And it's essentially almost free. You put your phone in airplane mode, and you're not getting bathed in EMF, and all of a sudden, the single device that you carried anyway is now tracking your sleep, helping you wake up better. And I can tell you that over the last 457 days, that I slept exactly 6 hours and 0 minutes, which is kind of cool. Well, per night, that is.
Would you not recommend those bands then? You just use one app?
Would I not recommend a band? I had the Jawbone, then I lost it, I didn't miss it, didn't have a good UI. Like, you look at your wrist, it doesn't do anything, and it keeps vibrating, and then you take it off. The Nike definitely is the coolest UI. Like, I really like the Nike. The data is questionable, but at least you can see the data on your wrist without having to like stick it in your phone. The basis, where I spent a little bit of time, I never got strong data from my wrist. Like, it seemed wobbly, and it was very big. I hear the new operating system or the new firmware for it is really good, and their sleep tracking has gotten almost as good as the body media stuff, which is also pretty good. So you can get more data from those wristbands, but a little bit of heart rate occasionally versus if it was 24/7 heart rate, I'd be into that. If I could get heart rate variability from the wrist, I'd be wearing it all the time. So overall, if it makes you happy, you could wear one, but calories burned from a wristwatch is complete, I think the technical term is quantified self-masturbation. It doesn't do anything.
On the sleep cycle, I've been playing with it, and I use it every day. How do I know how to get to the 90 to 100% quality sleep? How do I get that quality sleep in 6 hours instead of 8?
All of the sleep hacking apps like that include a significant portion of the score as the amount of time that you slept. So even Zio, like the original sleep tracking system, was like that. And I talked with Ben Rubin, the CTO there, about it, and just modified the algorithm to change the score. What you want is lots of deep sleep and lots of REM sleep and not a lot of light sleep. So basically what I do is I just autocorrect. If I'm sleeping around 75% in about 6 hours, I'm like, that's pretty good. What I haven't done, but I'd like to do, is talk to the sleep cycle guys to get the actual algorithm. And that would be quite useful. The other thing, and this is something that I would propose as one of your biohacks, go into sleep cycle if you have it, and let's see what my sleep notes look like. You can turn on sleep notes, and you can edit them. So if you do this on a regular basis, it takes all of like 5 seconds before you go to bed. But my list before I go to bed, I track GABA, theanine, carbs in the evening, whether I worked out, 5-HTP, whether I'm traveling, whether I used a laser on my head or elsewhere, whether I used pulse electromagnetic frequencies like I'm doing right now with this little thing, whether I used theta sounds, delta sounds, whether I did heart math before bed, whether I was refrigerating my mattress pad, whether I used electrical stimulation, whole body vibration, whether I had sex, whether I had an orgasm, whether I had coffee after 4, what else? Whether I already did coffee after 4, and there's a couple I never use, like whether I drink tea. I drink tea, but who tracks that? Tea's like water.
Which of those has the best result?
All of them. So some of them are relatively new, but so before I go to bed, it's like boop, 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 boop. I just do that. And then when I wake up, I actually get my heart rate off this, even though I have my heart rate off Bedit, because it's all stored in one place. How many steps did I walk? Well, as long as this was in my pocket, I got that. And this is a pretty neat tracking system. And you know how much work it is to gather that data? Almost none. Going back to the question of what system do you use. So there's all kinds of big data analytics people who have online platforms, and I've looked at all of those. I'm preeminently lazy. Unless I'm hacking a problem that requires all the data, I'm not going to invest the time it takes to set all that up. If I was doing more of a science project, I would. But there's a lot of things I want to do, and it seems like investing time in doing the things versus having incredibly elegant tracking. That's what I choose to do. But I admire the people who set up like amazing reports and 3D maps, and I'm kind of like, I should do that. I really should. But then I'm like, I should do something else, like try more smart drugs.
Do you have any experience with thinking caps and that whole hack?
Experience with thinking caps?
Yeah, thinking caps with the electricity, certain parts of the brain, helping learn.
Transcranial direct current stimulation.
Yeah, there's a couple things. I do have TDCS. I've had one for, I think, 4 years now. One of the clinical grade ones that's designed to deliver drugs through the skin. I like those better. I have one of those Focus, FOC.US things. I can't get it to work. I have 2 of them actually, and neither one of them seems to work. They work once, and then they quit. So the military has found they can cut the amount of time it takes to train a drone pilot. Very exciting job, I hear. Staring at a screen all day long. Almost like my old job. And what happens with that is about half the amount of time it normally takes, just by running a little bit of current through the left prefrontal cortex. So I'm learning to be a good archer. I'm learning archery. And so when I do that, I actually run a current over my brain. I live in a small town on an island, and I don't think anyone at the archery range knows why there's wires coming out of my hat. And I'm okay with that right now.
What's the name of the device you use?
I use the Chattanooga iontophoresis unit. And some people I hear have had luck with the Focus device, but the iPhone controller for it certainly doesn't work. But the one that I'm probably more enamored of is this thing, which is a cerebral electrical stimulation machine. David makes one now, it's called David, that is somewhat programmable. This thing is digitally programmable down to like 0.1 hertz, and it's totally made in like Miami Vice colors. There's only 2,000 of these ever made, and the guy doesn't make them anymore. In version 3 that he makes, he never ships, he just takes your money. Sorry. So digital, at least frequency controlled cerebral electrical stimulation is a different animal. What this does is instead of putting current through one part of your brain, this thing moves current back and forth between basically your temples or your earlobes. But the frequency that the current moves back and forth entrains the brain pretty strongly. So someone just sent me, and I would love to name who it was, but it's not coming to me right now, a new study that said they found gamma was tied with lucid dreaming. Now that's kind of cool because no one has figured that out before. And they were using electrical stimulation, but it was a TDCS style with gamma overlaid. And I'm like, screw that noise. So I tested between 47 and 53 hertz, which are in the gamma range. And lo and behold, 47 is the number for me. I can lucid dream when I put this thing on 47 and go to sleep. Pop right into it. It's way cool. Dial up a brain state, and there it is.
Are those elective devices better than the audio entrainment?
Is electrical stimulation better than audio entrainment? I mean, I've had light sound goggles for more than a decade, which I have several different flavors of them. One of the things I work with is PEMF with light sound goggles. So there's actually a magnetic field that's helping to entrain your body and your brain. They're all different. I do find electricity is stronger than the sounds, but I've used Centerpoint from Bill Harris. I used to use that. I used to listen to it every night for a couple of years. And I know Bill personally. In fact, in a couple months here, you're going to see a new brain training kind of software that I'm doing in partnership with Bill. And what happens with the sounds is that, well, they're less invasive, they require headphones, which are widely available, and frankly, they're safer. They're less likely to cause trouble. So I find that sounds are quite useful, and different sounds do different things, and they do different things to different brains. I do also find that if I want to dial up a 47 hertz gamma state when I'm going to sleep, it takes a while to like make a sound file and do all that stuff. And then you got to choose binaural, isochronic, some combination of them, what frequency, what waveform, what ramp. I can do all that, but it's a lot of variables. Whereas here it's like turn it on, turn it up till it tingles, and then have a lucid dream. Efficiency. But if you're going to do the sounds, Centerpoint, of all the ones I've tried, Centerpoint's the one that worked best. You use it on a daily basis, and stuff that's in your way, that Labrador brain, it just kind of melts over time. It's a very gentle, slow process, but it works, and it works pretty reliably. I know a lot of people that I really respect who've used it. I've been a lifetime member of Centerpoint for a long time.
Are there any hacks that you found when you're traveling a lot that work better than others, or a place to start?
Wow, travel hacks. Are you talking about for efficiency of travel, or for staying well, or staying focused, or what?
Yes.
So let me talk about staying well. So I haven't gotten sick when traveling for quite a while. This is the first time. And I'll tell you what happened. I fly business or first class. I use miles, or if I don't have miles, I'll pay. Because the cost of being down for a couple of days because you save $200 or $500 on airfare isn't worth it if you travel frequently like I do. So I had a business class seat booked. So I thought, all right, I know how much recovery time, I know what the quality of my air is going to be. And then they canceled my flight, so I got 2 hours of sleep, which I planned to get before a flight from Victoria to New York, and I had to fly WestJet. And I landed, and I had a sore throat. The other thing that I probably should have done is you can use colloidal silver gel, and you can stick it up your nose, which is a really good idea. And that helps to cover the mucosa, and it helps to provide a layer of extra antibacterial antimicrobial protection. I think it's a really good idea. So I didn't do that because, I don't know, didn't think about it. And I flew with bad air in a seat that doesn't fit me. The physical stress, especially when you're as big as I am, flying in a seat that doesn't fit you for 6 hours or 5 hours and transferring airplanes, it does come at a cost. The other thing is bring electrical tape and be merciless on your hotel room. If there's blinking lights, like there are in half of them, put tape on them, or do what I do with the phone. I usually just pull the battery out of the handset and unplug the other thing, because it doesn't make sense for you to try and sleep in an unfamiliar environment with an unfamiliar mattress with lights flashing. Like, it's just wrong. So I'm really religious about that when I travel. The other thing to do, it's kind of funny, there's a little square vent in your bathroom. Take a Kleenex and hold it up against the vent and go, tink. And now you've just clogged up the ventilation that was sucking the hallway air in underneath your door and making the room air really, really dry. And if the hotel is too dry, which most of them are because they save money that way, then you turn on hot water in the shower for a little while, and magically the humidity level turns up to something human in your room, and then you go to sleep. It's a neat little trick. Hotels hate it.
Couple questions. Is there a particular Centerpoint software?
Centerpoint has a program that takes, actually it's multiple years if you're going to do the whole thing. Okay. And you listen to a CD for a month.
Got it.
Then you move up a little bit. And it's, I mean, I've sat down with Bill Harris, I've seen his brainwaves on EEG, and the man can do things.
How about meditation devices, or how do you do it?
For meditation, I mean, I used to do a lot of yoga. I tend to respond well to types of meditation where instead of just visualizing something, you actually visualize how it feels on your skin. This is an amazing hack for meditation, by the way. Your sense of vision is tiny compared to your sense of touch. Your sense of touch is far more primordial and wired into your nervous system. So instead of imagining what it would look like, imagine what it would feel like. In fact, if you did a meditation, you closed your eyes and you touched your leg and you just moved your finger up your leg, and then you moved your finger away and recall the feeling of your finger on your leg moving up and down, and just keep moving that around your body, that will have a very different effect than thinking about the finger touching your body or visualizing your finger. It's the actual sensation in the skin that can make a huge difference. So meditations that use that sort of like tactile, physical thing tend to work really well for me. But I really don't meditate very much without sensors unless I'm doing a group meditation with people. Because with a heart mouth sensor, you can do a heart opening meditation, and if you didn't open your heart quite enough, well then the damn light didn't turn green, you didn't do it right, and you should do it again. So, you know, hurry, meditate faster is a great mantra. So what I'm just saying there is meditating without some notion of whether you're doing well doesn't work that well. And this is why historically, you know, you're in a Zen, in fact, one of the guys who runs a Zen school, who's done the 40 years of Zen training, the neurofeedback training that I work with my clients with, says, you know, a student may be sitting here in class and he has an attainment. And when a student has an attainment, the Zen master notices that their meditation has shifted somehow. He intuits it. And then he raises his eyebrow. Like, that's the only feedback you got. Like, wow, you did it. Like, it's a little handshake. Well, if you didn't see the eyebrow go up, you didn't get the positive feedback, and then next week you might do it again, and then you get it. So it's a very slow process. And I may be kind of weak here, but I prefer to meditate with like blinking lights and bumpers. Anytime I do it wrong, then I get notified. Like, if you're bowling for sport, take the bumpers out. Like, if you're bowling to knock over pins, then like leave the bumpers and those things like that for kids in bowling, you'll probably get more pins. So that's kind of my approach to meditation, very mature and enlightened.
Do you have an opinion on slow corticopotential neurofeedback?
Ooh, slow corticopotential neurofeedback. I am so interested in it that I bought the Atlantis Brainmaster 2 just so I could do it, and it's been sitting there gathering dust for like a year because I couldn't figure out how to do it in the extra 20 minutes I had. So yeah, I'm super interested in it, but I can't say that I have experience with it yet. I should probably like have someone come and show me how to do it, because I'm obviously never going to get around to that.
Okay.
About maintaining energy and concentration for long periods of time.
Maintaining energy and concentration for long periods of time. Cocaine. I take it you meant safely. It goes without saying, but bulletproof coffee. But let's talk about why that is. That Labrador in your head sucks your willpower. You're going to be able to pay attention. You are using some willpower to pay attention, not that much. But if you're trying to pay attention and your body is hungry, the neurons in your brain don't have enough energy, which can be from a ketone or from a glucose molecule. So if they're sitting there, whatever's around you, like a peanut, I want that, no, I want that, no. And you go, yes, no, and pretty soon you ground yourself down, because every time you say no to your biology, you're making a decision. Right? So you shouldn't have to say no to your biology. When you do that, you can pay attention for a lot longer. So having adequate ketones in the body, and maybe even in combination with some glucose, that's fine. Also, you can train yourself to pay attention better. And I use the blood flow sensor thing. I've used it enough that it's become pretty much effortless to pay attention to something, other than maybe like something where you really just don't give a rat's ass. And then it's not really a matter of effort. It's just like, I'm not going to do that because like I'd rather not pay attention. So what you're doing with that kind of software is you are looking at blood flow in the front of the brain using basically a bright LED. You're playing a really boring video game where you fly forward when blood moves to the front of your brain, and you slide backwards, which your body doesn't like. It feels unnatural because the animal in your head can't see behind you, so it feels unsafe when you're backing up because there could be a cliff or a tiger back there. So it's not safe to do this because what could be there? I better look, right? So subtle discomfort when you're looking at the screen and you slide backwards. But who doesn't like to soar forward, right? Now you're in control, you're on top, you get to be in charge. So these are things that are talking at the animal level to your brain, but it's in the software. So you're looking at that going, oh, okay. So naturally you just kind of want to pay more attention because that works. Well, biochemically what's going on there, you got more oxygen into the front of your brain and actually more blood. So you moved away these cellular toxins and you brought more metabolic activity, more mitochondrial function. If you manage to have some ketones in your blood, even better. And all of a sudden you're like, man, I wasn't really hungry. I could just pay attention all day long. Right? That's how I do it. I also take smart drugs. That helps.
So what if you can't have butter, or if you're sensitive to caffeine, what do you do for bulletproof coffee?
If you can't have butter, you mean, well, you
Small
can have butter, because remember my blog post about how can't is a weasel word?
Well, I understand that, but your body doesn't respond well.
I'm just giving you a hard time. So butter doesn't agree with you. All right. So does ghee agree with you?
I don't know. I'm just afraid that's still like dairy.
Well,
is it
I've
not?
found that the vast majority of people who are very sensitive to lactose and casein do okay on ghee. Like they try it and they're okay. There are less than 10 people I come across who are like, I can't do ghee. I just can't. I don't know why. So I believe that there are some, but they're vanishingly small. So ghee has had the protein, the moisture, and the lactose removed. So it's pretty much pure fat. And it's worth a try because you will get the CLA and you get the butyric acid that can be beneficial that's in there. If that doesn't work, it's possible to just use coconut oil and up the coconut oil with the brain octane to just raise the percentage of the C8 that's in it, so you get more of the ketones than you're going to get from normal coconut oil. The problem is that coconut oil plus C8 doesn't have all the same effects of the butter. Like it doesn't have the same satiating effects. It doesn't feel the same. And I believe that has to do with what it does to the gut biome. I'm not entirely sure what all the mechanisms are. It could be the satiating effect of the CLA, but there's something missing when you do it that way. If you don't tolerate the coffee, there's a really cool thing, and this is something I do when I'm doing the intensive, like 40 years of Zen. You don't want to be on coffee when you're doing that because you're training alpha waves, and caffeine and alpha waves interact with each other, so you want to train in a clean state. So what I do then is I take the vanilla, and vanilla, when it's pure vanilla powder, not vanillin or like fake vanilla flavor, and it's not moldy, it has an ORAC score north of like 100,000. It's one of the highest potential antioxidant herbs out there. So I take a whole teaspoon of vanilla, and I blend it with butter and the brain octane oil in hot water. And some sweetener, usually I use xylitol from birch trees because Chinese corn xylitol makes disaster pants ×2. And if you do that, you have a sweet, amazing vanilla drink. And you can feel like the antioxidant power or something, but it's a different thing than just having butter and brain octane and water. So I actually really appreciate that, and I drink it at night sometimes if I'm going to be writing and I don't want to have coffee at night. So that's kind of like the coffee-free way of doing it. So for you, it would be ghee plus brain octane to try it. If that didn't work, coconut oil plus brain octane. But the ghee and coconut oil won't froth properly, so add a dash of collagen to it, and it'll froth a little bit better. You need a little bit of protein of some sort in there to help get the froth.
And then if I want to start trying that intermittent fasting, if I do that, but I work out in the middle of that, do you still eat or do you not eat?
If you're doing intermittent fasting, be careful. Intermittent fasting is harder on women, and you probably want to break the fast with a few carbs, depending on lots of different variables, and I've written some about that specifically for women. And in that case, what you do is you wake up, you have just fat in the morning, then this is if you're doing bulletproof intermittent fasting. If you're doing just plain intermittent fasting, then you don't have anything in the morning. Then at the end of the fast, you exercise, and right after you exercise, you eat. Some people say, well, get yourself used to exercising and then not eating, but I think that creates adrenal stress, and it creates more stress in women. Women are more sensitive to those things than men because, well, you have to carry it around for 9 months if you get pregnant, and guys were less sensitive because, well, we are making new swimmers every 3 days, and we might not evolutionarily have to stick around as much.
So you don't recommend it? Especially if I'm having like I was a long-term gluten eater, and then I found out I couldn't have it, so I also am still recovering from gluten, so
if you're recovering from gluten and your energy systems aren't working really well, you probably don't need to do intermittent fasting. Make sure your adrenals are really solid and you're feeling good and your cycles are regular, and then try it. And there are women who do amazingly well. I've interviewed like Bree Schaff, and a major CrossFit champion, and some other women who are, actually Bree was a bobsledder. Some other women who are amazing athletes who could honestly kick my ass. And they're intermittent fasting, but on average, I find that women who aren't pro athletes who are recovering all the time do intermittent fasting. It is more challenging, and it can have more of an adrenal stress thing. So just be careful with it and be strong before you do it.
And do you have any suggestions for a few things to do just to help with energy?
I do, but let me take a couple more questions and come back to it. It's okay.
Ketosis, what is your thoughts on the regular stuff? Do most of your things, and you really talk about what happens when I have no carbs. I don't get the energy. I just get used to it.
So ketosis, when he has no carbs, he has no energy, and will you just get used to it? How long have you been in ketosis?
I'm not in right now. I'm just saying about the periods where it depends on the definition, I guess. So let's say you're under 30 grams of carbs or something. A lot of fat, a lot of protein, and a lot of
So if you're under 30 grams of carbs and you have no energy, that would be normal for 3 or 4 days as you switch into a ketosis mode. If you're cheating and you're using the brain octane oil, you can have ketones present even when you have more carbs than that, more like a livable amount, like 100 grams of carbs or something. So that's part of the equation. It's like, did you actually have ketones? Did you pee on a stick? So when I first started, I weighed 300 pounds. I was like, all right, Atkins, I'm going to learn about Atkins. And I got these pee sticks. I could never, in fact, not never, one time I had a light shade of pink. I was so stoked. I'd been eating nothing. The problem was I was eating way too much protein the whole time. In fact, much love to the low carb people who've been doing this stuff for 25 years. I spoke at the low carb cruise last year. In fact, there's a low carb cruise happening right now that I had wanted to be on, but I just couldn't make it happen. What I found happen with me is what I see with people who are on classical low carb diets. They're eating way too much protein, which itself is inflammatory in excess. Protein is a terrible fuel source, but it's a great building block source. And they also tend to eat a lot of NutraSweet and other things like that that just jack you up because well, there was no carbs, it must be good. So I found that half the weight goes off, and then you're like, oh, this stubborn stuff. But at least I have bags of loose skin. You can lose a lot of weight on low carb, but for me, it took another several years of playing around with this. Why did I lose half the weight? Why did I lose 50 pounds? The other 50 won't go away. And it was that second 50 that taught me a lot. So when it comes to ketosis, I also did an experiment that actually was pretty bad for me. All right, there's Eskimos. I'll raise you one. Eskimo diet, essentially 0 carbs. So I went for about 3 months, and I ate a very high fat diet with pretty decent amount of protein, but not excessive, I don't think, and 1 serving of green vegetables a day, just kind of for flavor. I'm like, there we go. And you know, my sleep went to hell. I was waking up 9 to 12 times a night. I couldn't tell I was waking up because I just woke up feeling tired, but my sleep monitoring system was like, you're awake, you're awake, you're awake. And what this was my body saying, could you stop sleeping and get up and eat something stupid? And then my eyes got terribly dry. I was getting eye drops in all the time. I couldn't figure out why. And then I actually developed some food allergies. The reason my eyes and my sinuses were so dry is that I didn't have enough glucose to make mucus, which is a glycoprotein. So is mucus actually a glycoprotein or some other sort of polysaccharide? I think it's polysaccharide. Apologies if there's anyone in here who knows what mucus is made out of, I could be wrong. Anyhow, what I discovered was that I didn't have enough mucus to line my stomach. So I got leaky gut from lack of carbs. So that's an extreme example. I was going to do it for like 6 months to be like, I am Eskimo, hear me squeal or whatever Eskimos do. And I canceled that one, but I actually got an egg allergy from doing that, which really sucks because egg yolks are like the food of the gods. And so I'm avoiding eggs for like 6 months to see if I can reduce that and then add them back in because frankly I miss them. I get some ice cream very greatly. So ketosis, don't be in ketosis for long periods of time. Go in and out. And this is the comfortable and uncomfortable part. When you go out, you might want to stay out. But if you don't have gluten and a bunch of junk food, you're not going to get cravings when you go out. So you're in ketosis for a couple days, and then you have rice and sweet potatoes and whatever else, and then you go back in. So this cycling in and out, it actually helps your adrenals, it helps you feel good, it helps your gut bacteria. And that's, I think, a much more sustainable way than always being in ketosis, which does appear to be bad for your gut bacteria, if nothing else.
Some experiments that you've done, like the top 3, that really changed your life, or it's just 100 different variables that you tweak and collectively the whole system runs a lot better and you feel unstoppable? Or is there just a couple of hacks that you've done that's just down to
One of them is one I talked about at the 2012 I think, Quantified Self Conference, which is the sex experiment, where I tested the Taoist equation for male ejaculation. And they tell you, well, this is only for men, don't try this, women, it's bad for you. It's your age minus 4 divided by 7, or age minus 7 divided by 4?
Second one.
Thank you. Age minus 7 divided by 4. And what that does, that gives you the number of days that you should wait between ejaculations if you want to maintain your health. And if you want to live forever, and Taoism was really about immortality. These were the original anti-aging researchers. They just didn't have test tubes and beakers and all that. So then it's only once every 30 days. So I tested the equation because it sounded kind of ridiculous, and I said, well, all right. Well, the idea of waiting that amount of time seemed insurmountable. And if you want to, I'm talking the 8 days, not talking the 30 days. And I did the 30 days in 3 different experiments. So it's doable. And if you thought that controlling the Labrador in your head was hard when you said no to the bagel, you have no idea how hard it is to overcome your biology, because the drive to procreate is built into your meat, but you can own it. And when you do, that's pretty badass, because then, well, whether you ejaculate or not is entirely a conscious decision. And you actually do change your testosterone levels. And here's the secret, and this is why it actually works. When you don't ejaculate, you have a hell of a lot more sex, right? So the woman in your life, if you're a man, is going to probably enjoy that. More frequent orgasms in women equals higher oxytocin, and there's lots of studies about that. Their EQ goes up, and it's generally good for them. So if you're the guy, like, you know, let's do it again. No, and again, even though you're not actually going to finish. So I found it was good for relationships, but overall, in terms of like controlling your biology, that was one of the hardest things to achieve. And it took like a year before I could gather enough data accurately, but it was a very strong learning experience that's echoed in the writings of like Napoleon Hill and various other people who talk about taking the energy that you're wasting there and applying it back to doing something that's maybe more important. So I found that was maybe one of my bigger experiments, just in terms of getting more energy, getting more focus, and just being in control of my biology. The other one that really you can cheat on now is, I did a very careful food journal for almost a year to try and figure out what foods were, you know, my kryptonite foods. Now, go ahead and get a food allergy test. How many of you have done a food allergy panel? So only about half of you. The rest of you, if you're eating something every day that makes you weak and distracted and gives you food cravings and gives you love handles, and you don't know what it is, and for $300 someone would tell you, oh, and by the way, it also affects your mood, so you can take the money you're giving your therapist and spend it on a food allergy panel this week, and that might be a good investment. Sorry if you're a therapist. But like, this is data we should all have.
Yes.
So.
Is there a good one?
LCAT is a good one. I mean, if food allergy, you want something that says IgG and IgE food allergy panel.
Can you talk about hacking air quality in apartments and cars?
Hacking air quality in apartments and cars. That's a really good question. Most of the air ionizers you can get actually produce small amounts of ozone, which are bad for you to breathe, which is a bit of a problem. Having a HEPA filter with a charcoal pre-filter is a really good idea. That's probably the best thing you can do. You might consider one with a UV light that treats the air to kill stuff that's in the air. You can also look at a dehumidifier or a humidifier. Either one of those carries with it both health benefits, but also substantial risks of introducing mold into your environment, because the dehumidifier grows mold inside it, and the humidifier tends to spread spores around whenever its filter medium gets colonized. So if you're doing that, you want to make sure you're running hydrogen peroxide or colloidal silver or iodine through it on a regular basis. Iodine might stain your curtains, however.
How would you tweak the bulletproof diet for athletes or performance athletes?
How would I tweak the bulletproof diet for performance athletes? Generally, it comes down to more carbs. One of the problems that, quote, performance athletes have is recovery. So if they're really good at recovering, then they probably need a few less carbs. And that's really the balance. You also might increase protein. I mean, if you're a power lifter and you have, you know, these giant shoulders, well, you're going to need more protein in order to handle that. So I tend to say fat, high healthy fat as a baseline is just a good idea. Like, that's what you should be doing. From there, protein depends on muscles. You know, are you a super skinny triathlete, or are you, you know, a power lifter? Just because your protein requirements will be different. And then, what did you do that day? You know, did you fast and then work out? And I think for performance athletes, sometimes working out and then not fueling is a good idea. But for the most part, they're going to need more carbs, and they might not want to be in ketosis all the time. I don't think it's advisable to be an Ironman athlete in ketosis. We weren't meant to be that way. You should be a very metabolically flexible Ironman athlete who's fully capable of burning fat as fuel, probably with even MCT oil available to you as part of your fuel source, so you can use two mitochondrial pathways at the same time. But I wouldn't recommend a zero carb diet for performance athletes, or even an extremely low carb diet. I think it just creates adrenal stress and maybe even thyroid problems.
So if you do biohacking, what are some biohacks that you would recommend for college students?
Biohacks for college students. Vodka over beer. It sounds ridiculous, but count how many you drink and track your hangover symptoms. Like, look how long it takes to feel human in the morning. And you can track the other things like vitamin C and glutathione and all the stuff I write about. But the difference between beer, which contains mycotoxins, especially American beer, and vodka, which is filtered in charcoal, it is a measurable, noticeable difference, and it affects you for several days, believe it or not. Like, sorry, beer, even though it tastes really good, isn't really your optimal choice from that perspective.
What do you mix your vodka with?
What?
You don't want, you don't want a ton of sugar, but you don't want artificial sweeteners. What do you use to make vodka palatable?
Coffee.
Good morning.
I use soda water and lime, but I tend to drink soda water with lime with or without vodka, but I'm not a big drinker anyway. I still think there isn't a great argument for drinking vodka as, you know, having huge positive health impacts, but there are some people who argue that, you know, a drink a day. I think it's more correlation data versus causation. Also depends on your liver, I guess.
Do you advocate like oxygen therapy and consuming hydrogen peroxide?
Oxygen therapy. I've drank hydrogen peroxide. You put up to 10 drops in a big glass of water. It's this is of the 35%. It's a treatment for digestive problems, and it actually seems to work. I wouldn't go much above that. I've used lower concentrations rectally a couple times when I was really struggling with what's going on in my gut many years ago. That is even more alternative and kind of strange. I haven't done that in a very long time. The other oxygen therapies, like ozone therapy is an amazing way to get extra electrons in the body. It turned my brain back on when I had Lyme disease, and I'm a huge fan of ozone. I wish that the FDA would get out of our way and allow people to do what is well proven and safe and is used across Africa, Cuba, and Russia for what are considered to be incurable diseases here. Also, it just helps you perform better, especially after a long flight. My new biohacking facility that I'm working on putting in my barn will hopefully have a hyperbaric oxygen chamber if I can find a soft-walled one that I can afford, because they're damned expensive. But I'm really hoping that I can find it made in China or something, because there's definitely good reasons to use hyperbaric. And I'm actually going to be talking about that some more on the podcast coming up. You can also do the poor man's hyperbaric, which is particularly useful if you're over about 30, 35. It's called EWAT, exercise with oxygen therapy. You breathe oxygen at 10 liters per minute while running as fast as you can for like an hour, if I remember the protocol right. The first time I did this, I was like 26, and I had this giant oxygen tank that I bought from an estate of someone on Craigslist. Because it's very hard to get oxygen without a prescription. Like, they regulate it like you'd think it was cocaine. And so I dragged it with me in a 24-hour Nautilus, and I had like this mask, and I'm sitting on the treadmill just running, just looking around. It was kind of funny. But if you do this on a regular basis, the exact protocol is a bit fuzzy because I haven't looked at it in 10 years. But what it does is it causes permeation of the extracellular fluid, so that basically you get oxygen in areas where you normally wouldn't, and it changes the gas permeability of the cell membrane. And it seems to be permanent for several years, so you have a more youthful-like gas permeability of your cell membranes. So that's kind of a cool, relatively cheap thing to do. You can buy an oxygen concentrator for cheap. They'll do 10 liters per minute, about $300. Look at Craigslist or eBay. Get one for hobby use only. Yeah, that's what it's for.
Hey Dave, we've got about 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes.
So you maybe like 3 more questions.
All right, 3 more questions. We can do that.
So you were talking exercise on it. What's like the most high quality, efficient way that you would recommend people to exercise? Because everyone talks about the diet, but not so much on the exercise.
Well, given that like 90% of body composition is diet, exercise is kind of the frosting on the cake, and movement very good for you neurologically and for lymphatic drainage, but that isn't necessarily exercise. The exercise that works best is the Body by Science protocols by Doug McGuff. Very well researched, very well studied, and it's like, how do you get the most exercise in the least amount of time? They're on the website, like the Cliff's Notes from the book, but buy the book. Doug's work is very good. And it's basically 5 core body weight style exercises like squats, or running like there's a tiger chasing you for 400 meters, walking for a minute, doing it again until you throw up in 15 minutes or less. It's kind of the protocol. You do it once a week, and that works really well. However, electrical stimulation using some up-and-coming protocols that aren't widely available appears to be even better in less time, because that's pretty much what you're looking at here. This is like all electricity right now. I've done like 1 CrossFit workout in the last 6 months, some whole body vibration. At home I do that without doing like body weight poses at all, just for lymphatic drainage. I work out once or twice a week. And I've been traveling a lot, not sleeping that much, and I don't know, like I have a little bit of inflammation because I'm dealing with like the end of a pretty long, intensive road trip where I've given talks like this every day for a while. And I have like a little bit of inflammation back here that I don't particularly like in flying and not grounding and whatever. I wouldn't have this at home, but overall, dude, I'm 41. I used to weigh 300 pounds. I have stretch marks. Like, I'm pretty stoked. Second row.
So you've only mentioned this tangentially, but what are some differences in hacks that you've seen for women, or are there any like female-specific hacks that you're going to pick up right now?
Female-specific hacks. This is one that well, I'm less qualified than my wife, but since I wrote a book on fertility, like I know a thing or two. There are many women who have discomfort and problems with the monthly cycle. So you get PMS, you get discomfort, it lasts too long. is eminently hackable, and it's so environmentally responsive to what you eat. But it's a challenging hack because it's responsive to what you ate over the course of the last couple of weeks. See, the longer the feedback period, the more challenging it is to tease out the data. So if I was a woman and I was menstruating, I would be like, all right, can I accurately predict this? And what are the variables I can do to predict it and make it comfortable and controllable so it doesn't hurt? Do I need more krill oil? Do I need evening primrose oil? Do I need more protein? When do I need more protein at one point in my cycle? And one of the coolest little tricks of all that I came across in the research for the Better Baby book was when the moon is full, open your windows and sleep with them open. And the light that comes from that circadian exposure to moonlight on full moon actually helps you to sync up with the moon, which is what your body's trying to do, even though it gets jacked up by living in a city with lights. Who would have thought, right? But I think that's kind of cool that your body does that. By the way, we do that at home. All right, last question.
Okay, I have a question on carbohydrates.
All right.
Because I find it very confusing in the popular literature. Jamine says don't count the non-starchy vegetable carbs, that like you're shooting for 50 grams, it's from the rice and the potatoes. Usually I've seen it that like about half of the calories are fiber, don't count, but the other half is metabolized short-chain fatty acids. So when you say you're keeping your carbs at a certain level, what are you counting in terms of the vegetable carbs especially?
Oh, the question is, are we counting vegetables as carbs? No. Eat as many vegetables as you can stand. Vegetables are basically invisible. They're good for fermentation, they're good for bulk in the gut, but as a source of fuel, they aren't really good fuel. As a former raw vegan who had to buy new salad bowls like this big to try and get enough food, even when I soaked them in avocados and olive oil, like no, vegetables pretty much, they use their own calories as they go. So Gemini is absolutely right. I have a lot of respect for Paul's work.
Thank you.
All right, Dave. So one last question I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to ask this, but in all of your experiences, what would be your top 3 things?
Oh, so basically the final podcast question?
Yeah.
The first one is, there are no 3 questions. First one is, if you're not eating enough of the right calories, you're not actually living. Like, you can survive on a lot less, but if you don't have your brain fueled enough, you will be walking around less human than you're capable of being.
Wow.
And I don't mean to say that in a, like, those are subhuman and they should be mistreated, but I can tell you, if your brain doesn't have the energy that it needs, the parts of you that you hold most dear are the ones that turn off first, and that sucks. So don't let that happen. The second one would be, learn what it feels like when your sympathetic nervous system fires, because if it's happening all the time and you don't know it, and there's something inside your head that you can't see right now that's saying kill or run away, wouldn't it be nice to know that so you could turn it off? You owe it to yourself to do that. It's under $100. It takes 6 weeks of 10 minutes a day. It's not that hard. You have no excuse for not doing this if you can be in this room. The final one would be gratitude. It's a simple, free one, and it's something that I do with my 4.5-year-old and with my 7-year-old when I put her to bed at night. And I'll sit down with Alan and I'll say, Alan, let's do gratitude. He says, okay. And he sits there and he says, I'm grateful for playing in the park. I'm grateful for, and then he finds 2 other things that he remembers from his day that he's grateful for, and he thinks about that before he goes to sleep. He's not spending that time thinking about, I'm not grateful that Jimmy hit me in the head or whatever happened. The interesting thing there is that he says, Daddy, what are yours? And then I'll tell him what mine are. And then he goes, I want to change one of mine. So he'll upgrade his gratitudes. He's like, that was a better one. I have to have the best gratitude. And that's good too. But if you make a habit of that, whether or not you have kids in your life, before you go to bed, find something to be grateful for. And if you want bonus points, every time something that makes you want to kill because it fires your sympathetic nervous system, find something to be grateful for about that. Even if it's something as grateful as, I'm really glad I learned I'm not going to do that again. It changes the way your nervous system works. So if you can build gratitude in as a practice, that leads the way to forgiveness. And forgiveness, the way I define it, is really refusing to carry other people's burdens, because you don't have to tell someone you've forgiven them. You just have to stop paying attention to whatever it is that sympathetic nervous system inside of you is worrying about. And when you learn that skill, which is a very difficult skill, one that I actually learned with the electrodes on my head, that gives you an unfair advantage in much of your life, because you can walk around doing what you actually want to do instead of what you're worrying about. So those are my three.
Awesome.
Thanks everyone.